Hey, what's up guys? So today I'm going to be showing you guys how I mix my drum recordings for my drum cover videos. All of the links for the plugins that I use for my tracks will be in the description box down below. Keep in mind, this is just how I do it. I am not a professional. This is just how I do it. If you guys have any suggestions of how I can do it better, please comment below and let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the mix and anything that you might be able to see that I can do better. All right, so let's just get into it. All right, so let's open up the project. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to rename each track. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with the overheads first. So how I usually mix my overheads is that I usually do an EQ. I go to the drum portion and I hit brighten overheads, and that's it. I do that for both. And then for overhead 1, that's capturing the hi-hat and the cymbal to my left, your right if you were facing the drum set. And overhead 2 captures the ride cymbal and the other crash that I have, sort of like the wash crash. And what I do is I pan my first overhead all the way to the right, and I pan my second overhead all the way to the left. And so if you sit there and listen to it, it'll give you a fuller sound, and this is just sort of the room audio. So let's see. So it gives a real bright sound. So once that's done, and of course the volume control I'll sort of fix at the end, I'll go back to the kick. And what I do for the kick, the snare, and all of the toms, I have 2 plugins that I mainly use for all of them. The first plugin is a Tech Audio D-Gate. And what a D-Gate will do is it will basically, if I pull this frequency up, everything below this will get cut off. So basically, I don't want to hear any of the drum set other than the piece that I am listening to in this track. So in this case, the kick drum, I'll only want to hear the hits from the kick drum mostly. So it'll just clean up the sound altogether. Because if you listen to the kick without it, you can hear the whole drum set in the drum mic. So if you can hear the drum set. But if I start to pull this up, you can only kind of hear the bass drum. So I usually pull it up to about here. It gives it a little bit of a punchier sound. Now the other plugin I use is a Klanghelm MJUC Junior. And what this will do is this will bring up the attack, and this compressor, when you pull it up, it brings out more of the tone of the drum, and then, but it'll kind of make the volume or the gain diminish. And so this knob brings the gain back up. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's bring this back, and I'll show you how I usually bring it up. See how that warms it up, but then you kind of can't hear it, so you bring that gain back up. Bring it up to about there, so you can get a much warmer sound and you can hear it really well. It gives a little bit of a punchier feel, but also keeps it warm. And then the last thing I do is I add a channel EQ. And I go to the drums. This is built into GarageBand already. Go to drums and I go to punchy kick. Gives it a punchy sound. Bring up the tone right here. Sort of sharpen that peak. And then bring out the low end. That's how I do that. And then all I do after that is give it a little bit of reverb. There you go. And then what I do is, since there's nothing going on right here, I usually just delete this out. And that'll actually clean up the entire track. There we go. So now if I add that in, with the overheads that I've already done and the actual track itself, now we're getting somewhere. The bass drum is sounding really, really good, sounding punchy, and it's sounding warm. All right, so next thing and that's what I do for the kick. That's it. And then once I listen to the whole mix, I'll go back and I'll add a little bit more here, a little bit more there to make it feel better. So that's how I do that. Now let's move on to the snare. So the snare by itself, let's see how that sounds. As you can see, you can hear the hi-hat a lot. You can hear the rest of the drum set a lot. So what I'll do is I'll come in here, I go to my D gate, and let's see how this D gate helps. And now what I do is go to the same plugin that I use for the bass. And see how that, it brought the volume down, but it brought out more of the tone of the snare. And then what I do is I just bring that gain back up to where I want it. All right, and then for the channel EQ, there's a couple of different snare sounds that they give you. They give you a natural snare, a refresh snare, a ringing snare. I don't really like the ringing snare plugin. Let's look at the refresh snare. See how that EQ does. Now it's still ringing, so what I'll do is, there's still a ring there, so what I'll do is, I'll bring that mid down a little bit to give it a little bit more of a drier sound. All right. And then what I'll do is I'll cut off this first portion and I'll cut off this end portion right here. And then the same thing as for the bass drum, I'll bring a little reverb into it. So now when you hear them both together, now when you bring it with the overheads, there you go. Now you're starting to sound a lot fuller. You sound like you're in a larger room, but you're still getting all of the nuances in the drum set. And let's hear it with the actual track. There you go. And now what I could do is I could zoom in and go through and cut out all of these little in-betweens, but we're gonna do that in the toms, and you won't really hear that too much in the final mix, in my opinion. So here's how I mix my toms. And how I mix my toms is the same way for all 4 of them. So I'll go to my toms and I'll listen to it, and I'll do the same thing. I'll do the D gate, I'll do the MJUCR Junior, bring out the tone of the drum, and then I'll show you how I EQ the tom once I get there. So let me go through and do everything else. Here's how I do my channel EQ once I'm done. I'll go in, all of this is already built into GarageBand. I'll go to my high tom EQ, and what I do is I go to where I actually hit the drum and I'll look for the peak. And I see that the peak is about right here. Sharpen that peak. Hear it again. So there you go. Then I bring this low end out a little bit. All right. And then what I usually do is, because you can already hear the tom in the overheads as well, I bring the volume down to about, say about -11. And then what I do to get rid of that constant sound of the toms ringing when I'm hitting the bass drum, I'll go through and I'll cut out everything before and after each hit. And let me do that for this line really quick. All right, and once I get to the end, I just go back through and I shift select everything that I don't want in the track. And that will immediately get rid of everything that I don't want. Then you just hit delete. And you do that for every single line. So let me go ahead and do that for every single line and I'll be right back. Let me stop right here. I forgot to say, for my channel EQ for my toms, our first two toms, they will always get the high tom EQ for my first two, then my third one gets the medium, and then for my floor tom, obviously gets the floor tom EQ. All right, let me go ahead and add those in. All right, so now that I've done everything to the toms, now I can kind of listen to everything together. Oh, and before I do that, let's talk about panning these toms. So the way I pan it is basically from left to right. So I know some people do it from right to left because if you were facing the toms or facing the drum set, the sound would be coming from your right to left to you. But for me, I prefer it the other way around. So how I pan it is the first tom, probably like an 11 or 12. The second tom is at about 6. Oh, and I need to rename this tom. Didn't even see that. There we go. Third tom, I'll put it right at about a 6. And then my floor tom, about a 10 or an 11. Now I can listen to the whole thing together and let's see how it sounds with overheads before I turn the track on with it as well. Let's see. Now, I didn't like how long those toms rang out. They can ring out a tiny bit longer, so I'm going to extend these tracks. Need to ring out a tiny bit longer. Give them some time to breathe. So let's hear that. All right, now I can bring up the volume a little bit on these toms. See how that does. satisfied with that right now. Let's turn on the track and see how it all sounds together. All right, I'm satisfied with that. Now, as far as for the master track, let's see how this sounds, because they have a couple of mastering tools. So this is kind of a funk. So let's see how it sounds with the dance master track EQ going. Let's see. All right, so once I've added everything to it, I'm pretty satisfied with everything. What I'll do is I will go ahead and I will airdrop it to myself, and then I'll add it and queue it up with my video of me recording. And if you want to see the final results, the link of the final results will be in the description box below. Thank you guys again for checking out the way that I mix my live drums. If you guys have any tips or tricks or any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment box below. But again, thank you guys for coming.